So air connectivity is key to trade and to travel. And just prior to COVID, 10 million passengers a day were passing through airports. By 2035, that number is expected to reach 35 million. So from 10 million pre-COVID to 35 million according to IATA. The key to smooth travel is going to be connectivity. Our panel today is going to explore the investments and the policies that will be needed to unlock the potential of international travel and tourism in the Western Hemisphere. And joining us today, starting on the left, is the Honorable Anayansy Rodríguez, Minister of Tourism for Guatemala. James Hogan, former CEO of Etihad Airways and current Executive Chairman of Knighthood Global Limited, an international advisory and investment company. The Honorable William Rodríguez, Minister of Tourism for Costa Rica. Sean Donohue, CEO of the Dallas-Fort Worth Airport. Is it International Airport?
Yes.
International Airport. And Frank Rainieri, President and CEO of Grupo Puntacana. I'm Arnie Weissmann, Editor-in-Chief of Travel Weekly. So there's a wide disparity among processes in getting travelers from point A to point B among countries in the Americas, and sometimes even within different airports within a single country. The US airports play a key role, not only in connecting Americans to other countries in the Western Hemisphere, but in facilitating travel from other parts of the world to destinations throughout the Americas. So Sean, first question's to you. What sort of issues do transit travelers face when connecting in US airports?
Sure, thank you, Arnie. Well, let me frame the challenge. We will serve 80 million customers this year at DFW Airport. 45 to 50 million of them will connect. So they'll never arrive at DFW or depart in terms of coming to the airport. They are connecting. And to give probably a better example is British Airways flies an A380 to DFW every day from Heathrow, 500 customers. Of those 500 customers, 350 of them will connect to 100 flights within 2 hours. So it's extraordinarily complex. They'll connect to DR, they'll connect to Costa Rica, they'll connect to Guatemala. And what we focus on is how do we make that journey as predictable as possible for the customer? And we do that in two ways. We focus on technology, and we also focus on people. And from a technology standpoint, over 80% of international arriving customers at DFW will be cleared by immigrations through biometrics. And that is the most secure and it is the most efficient way of clearing customers. And if you're in a trusted traveler program, you never even show your passport. So your biometric picture is your clearance document into the US. And we work with Customs and Border Patrol to make that as efficient as possible. But the other piece of it is the people side. And as James knows well, when you look at people who are traveling, 75% of the people who travel once or twice a year. That's it. And they don't understand the processes, and technology maybe doesn't help them as much as it helps people who travel all the time. So we invest in a lot of people to help their journey and to create that sense of predictability, create that sense of welcoming. And that's what we try to do at DFW because it is hard. It is hard to connect. It is hard to connect internationally. And using technology, using the people resources that we have is how we try to make that as efficient as possible.
Okay. And is there a uniform approach to that among U.S. airports, or does it vary from airport to airport? What you're doing with clearly a focus on that, but
Sure.
is the experience uniform across the states?
It's not. What I would tell you is U.S. Customs and Border Patrol, there's a famous U.S. politician named Tip O'Neill, and his quote was always, "Everything is local." And that's what we find. We try to partner with U.S. Customs and Border Patrol locally. We treat them as a business partner. Yes, security is their number one, number two priority. But they also recognize that for international customers coming to DFW, the first point of welcoming into the United States is a Custom and Border Patrol agent. And we try to talk about that. We try to educate. We try to make sure there's a little bit more of a welcoming spirit. And the only way you get that done is you don't get that done working in Washington. You get that done working locally and treating those federal partners as business partners.
Okay. Now I'm wondering, if, can the people in the back here, would it be helpful if we close the doors in the back? Or does it, maybe the doors could be closed, because I can hear a fair amount of noise coming in now. Okay, so James, you have a global perspective on aviation connectivity. And from your experience, from your observations, what public policies, as well as activity by private companies, could better facilitate travel amongst the Americas?
Well, thank you. Well, it's interesting. You know, as was just mentioned, it's about people. You've got your customer, your guest, and you've got the airport services. And when you're dealing with people, there's huge complexity. And when you look at the Americas, it's such an important market for all of us. I established an airline called Etihad and built it over 11 years. And one of the challenges that we faced with the Americas was first the bilateral issues, with the US airlines trying to block entry into the Americas. Once we overcame that, the second issue was slots. So you need that as an airline, that base, to be able to build your connectivity model. And it's not unique to the Gulf and the Middle East. My friends from the Caribbean have got similar issues when they look at connectivity with the US. But entering America can be such a unique experience. It can be pleasant, or it can be unpleasant when you arrive at the point of entry. And to ensure that our US program was successful, we worked very closely with the US government in regard to setting up customs pre-clearance in Abu Dhabi at the time. Because what we found is for our guests coming out of India, coming out of the Middle East, coming out of the Gulf, that the ability to clear customs first in Abu Dhabi and then arrive domestically in the US took away a lot of that concern about, will I be profiled, will I be put into secondary area, and if I'm going to be turned around, maybe it's better to be turned around in Abu Dhabi. Now, what that meant over time, we were able to improve our connectivity model. And that was a great example where the Abu Dhabi government and the US government, with ourselves and Homeland Security, worked very hard to get that proposition right. Now, for me, if I was looking at US airports and connectivity, I'll be rolling that out much further. At the moment, it's in Canada, it's in certain Caribbean countries. But when you look at the process of connectivity, when Sean talks about that ratio of transit and destination O&D for the customer, you've got to put your back into the customer. What ensures that travel is seamless? You want to travel with your bags, you want to make sure that you get through the airport efficiently, and you meet your minimum connecting time requirements. So from a passenger perspective, there's more work to be done. I'm glad Sean raised the issue in regard to service standards, whether it be TSA staff, whether it be general customs staff, and the way that individuals are treated. I see that at other airports around the world where the standards certainly have to be raised to encourage more travel, to encourage travel that is People understand the reasons to be checked properly, to be profiled. That isn't an issue. It's the way it's approached. So the way the government continues to embrace with the industry to make it more seamless is important, because as we know, travel is a multiplier. It's a multiplier in regard to destination, in regard to spend, all the things we've heard about today, employment, and connectivity is fundamental. And I was mentioning to Frank earlier, we've been looking at some Caribbean models, a similar issue. But, bilaterals, airport slots make it very difficult to get a smooth system, because the dominant carriers, in fact, dominate the slots and the bilaterals and squeeze the competition.
Yeah. So Minister Rodrigo López, two Minister Rodríguez here.
But that's correct.
Okay. Minister Rodríguez López, Costa Rica, very popular ecotourism destination. And while most of your visitors are from North America, many of those who come from Europe and South America, and all who come from Asia, Africa, and Australia must connect through a third country. So what are some of the issues that travelers to Costa Rica face that you're aware of when transiting, and what would be your recommendations for making it easier for travelers to get to Costa Rica?
Thank you. Thank you for the question. Well, first of all, having been in the aviation industry for 20 years, I know that the preferred action of any traveler is to be in the next point where they go, without any connection. Any traveler actually is willing to fly from the point A to point B without no connections, okay? So that is a fact. We are not discovering anything new with that. But since even destinations like us do need the connections to get there, the answer to your question were responded by these two gentlemen. It's a matter of technology, and it's a matter of people. And as much as we work to ease that situation, we are going to be in a good manner resolving the situation of the travelers. Two simple things. First, the problem in the Americas, the connectivity problem in the Americas is not from north to south. It's from south to south or to central to Caribbean, because from central to the north, the service is well provided. I don't know if you know that Costa Rica is the third country in Latin America with the number of airlines, more airlines, U.S. airlines flying to Latin America. The first two is Mexico and Canada, for obvious reasons. They have the same borders. So, even with that fact that we have the large number of U.S. airlines flying to Costa Rica, we have problems. We have problems because, for instance, in the New York area, which is the main airport to go to Central America, it's not Kennedy, it's New Jersey. It's New Jersey. And that is a problem, even though the non-stop flight is a problem, because the people have to go from New York to New Jersey to take the plane. And the second thing is that from South America to Central America, or from Central America to the Caribbean, we have almost no connections. We have to do connections in Panama or in some other places. And that is not the best situation to promote tourism for any destination. So my short answer is, I would say that in the near future, what we have to do is to build the profitable connections in Central and Latin America to incentivize the airlines to fly nonstop. If not, we are going to be living these problems permanently.
Yeah. This is a good lead-in to the next question for Minister Rodríguez Castillo. There appears to be only one country, Spain, outside the Western Hemisphere that has service to Guatemala. That means that all the other visitors from Europe, from Africa, from South America, from Australia must make a connection. So typically, when you are wanting to add additional routes, you have a chicken and egg situation. The airlines say, well, when your traffic builds, we'll add the route. And you'll say, well, if you add the route, the traffic will build. And this goes on everywhere around the world. How do you approach an airline in this situation? What is your argument to say we need more nonstop service?
Well, for Guatemala, it's vital to follow up to the provisions of our Sustainable Tourism Master Plan 2015 to 2025 regarding air connectivity, which includes the drive to improve the public and public strategic alliances. The Guatemalan Tourist Institute supports the airlines that currently operate in our country through joint actions and have allowed us to promote our destination and marketing activities. Currently, 13 airlines connect our country through 38 routes with than 240 weekly frequencies. The destinations to which we currently connect via air are USA, Mexico, Costa Rica, Panama, Honduras, Colombia, España, República Dominicana, Belice. And for the President, Dr. Alejandro Yamatei government, it's important to promote projects and actions that allow the economy and social development of the country, and air connectivity definitely translate into opportunities for economic generations.
Okay. So Frank, with Grupo Puntacana, plays a major role in the development, especially in the eastern part of the Dominican Republic. How important are the connectivity issues to you when you plan to make investments? And what actions do you try to take to ensure that things will go as smoothly as possible for visitors to your properties before you decide to build?
Well, definitely, connectivity is basic. That's an extremely important part of any project. I had the experience because when I started building Puntacana, there was no airport.
Yeah. By the way, probably face this with your mic's on the other side, so when you speak to me, that everyone else can't hear as well. But,
That's right.
yeah.
When I began Puntacana, there was no airport, so there was no connectivity, there were no road. And so we had to jump in and build the first fully international private airport in the world. And after we began building the airport, or after it got into operation, everybody started investing in hotels. But it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy because, first of all, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? And the airlines, the first thing they tell you is, what guarantees do we have? So we have to go the old way, get the charter planes, because they are the easiest one to get on board. And after we got the charter flights, and we got a substantial number, then the regular airlines start coming. And of course, now it's very easy to talk about moving 8 million people plus through international flights in Punta Cana. But connectivity shouldn't be limited to one point to another point, and especially in small countries like ours, in Central America and the Caribbean. You know, the diversity that we have between our countries. I mean, we have 2 ministers. Costa Rica, we have the beautiful beaches of Punta Cana and other parts of the Dominican Republic, but they have an environmental part much more developed than what we have. Guatemala has Mayan tradition that none of us have, and incredible. So we got to talk about multi-destination among ourselves. And the same thing happened for the small islands of the Caribbean. And we cannot pretend that each one of us can have long-range flights to every airport in the Caribbean and Central America. So we got to start, Texas is bigger than all of the Caribbean plus Central America together. Okay? And they have hubs, 2 hubs, but really Dallas is the main hub. Houston, I better don't say it. Yeah. I don't want anybody from Houston to get mad at me. But really Dallas is the hub. So we got to start thinking of how we can implement for long range a hub that serves all of our island. But it's incredible. We don't have connections between ourselves. Now we have a Dominican airline that just began a month ago starting to fly. I hope that is successful because we need the connectivity to be able to develop tourism from long-range destinations like Europe or this country, Saudi Arabia. And we got to work on that. Of course, we have many barriers, but that's another question. Another point that we got to talk about, because it's not only to talk about how we can get connectivity, what are the barriers among ourselves that we have?
Thank you. It's a interesting perspective to just build a private airport when you can't get the others done. And Punta Cana today is such a big destination, important destination in the Caribbean. So, Sean, you spoke about the importance of building local connections to facilitate, and James, you talked about the importance of pre-clearance approval. And Sean, in saying that everything is local and that certainly is true, but the U.S. really has, I think, a problem in terms of its reputation for not being a very friendly welcome. And there's some things that are unique, or at least unique in my experience, that passengers have to pick up their bags before they arrive versus wherever it is that they're going. Everything may be local, but do you think perhaps there are some things that could be done at the federal level to make the U.S. a more welcoming thing? Because a lot of people, when they come, they're really afraid they're going to be turned back.
Sure. Well, a couple of thoughts on that, Arnie. Number one, this perspective that international customers are concerned they're going to be turned back, the data really does not support that. So we have 15,000 international arriving customers each day at DFW. Less than 5 actually are not welcomed or not allowed into the U.S. But you're right, that is a perspective. And yes, we have to work with Washington. I would highlight one change that thankfully U.S. Customs, I think, learned from Europe and other countries. 4 or 5 years ago, when you arrived in the U.S., you cleared immigrations, you collected your bags, and then you had to clear customs. So you had to see 2 agents to exit the customs hall. Today, and we started this at DFW 5 years ago, you go through the immigrations check, you pick up your bag, and there's no more check. You declare that you have nothing to declare, and you just walk out. So there has been progress made, but I would say this, to my earlier point, the inconsistency is what really frustrates customers. And that's what we try to buy down, and I use the term buy down intentionally. I actually spend several $1 million a year paying for overtime for Customs and Border officers. And every single traveler to the U.S. pays a fee to fund Customs and Border Patrol to make sure we have enough staffing. But if I don't invest in paying for overtime, then the customer experience is not going to be to my acceptance level. That's not a great position to be in as a business, but we will continue to do that, continue to work with U.S. Customs and Border Patrol. They are good partners. We're making progress. But sometimes you have to think outside the box and make your own investments because you never want to see the customer penalized.
Yeah. Are you aware of other airports that do that as well?
Some other airports do it. The argument is, well, if the airports start paying for it, you'll never get Customs and Border Patrol to staff appropriately. You're giving them a crutch. I get that. I have fellow directors who complain about us doing it. But at the end of the day, I'm not going to penalize our customers, and that's what it comes down to.
And then I want to stay with you for one more moment. We don't have too much time, but because I think there's a significant crisis going on right now with the U.S. With the visa wait times. So among first-time visitors from India, Mexico, and Brazil, the average wait time now for a U.S. visa is 400 days. What, if anything, are the airports, are the airlines, the U.S. travel industry, is there anything that they can do to get this changed?
It's completely unacceptable, Arnie. And as an association, the airports, U.S. travel, we're all working on it. Again, just to remind everyone, that is a U.S. State Department issue. And it has to be addressed, it has to be fixed. During the Obama administration, we had a similar period about 10 years ago where the wait times were unacceptable. They fixed it. And the point we make, and we've heard it today, the value that is created by travel and tourism, it can create a permanent impact. If people say it's going to take a year to get a visa, they will travel somewhere else.
Yeah.
And the permanency of that decision and that inability can be very, very damaging. So we just have to fix it.
Okay.
We will welcome them in Puntacana.
That's exactly true. There's competition for every destination. We've got very little time left, but I would like you all, if you could name the one thing that, if you could change it to help connectivity to your country, or in the case, James, for you, that you see globally as a big issue, what would be your priority? Where would you put your most attention? And let's start with you, Minister Rodríguez Castillo.
I think that it's so important if one of our main tasks in promoting innovation, connectivity, and technological development is a transversal axis of the Guatemalan government. It's so important to include these three themes in our development to the country and the air connections. And I think that it's a work that we have to do with other countries too.
Okay, James?
One of the biggest challenges in aviation, it's one of the few industries where it isn't truly global. You have the mature markets of the Americas, of Europe, where the systems work well. There's perception, there's reality, there's developments in regard to what's happening in biosecurity, but then there's the rest of the world. Africa, Indian subcontinent, Pakistan, Bangladesh, big markets where there's a real disparity between the West and the developing world. And part of the challenges, as what I mentioned earlier, is the bilateral process, is the strength of major players versus emerging players, and the ability to improve the process with emerging airlines over the next 10 years, I think is very important to try and, you'll never create leveling up, but to try and create better connectivity, because the rules of flow of aircraft and how they navigate through systems needs to improve out of the developing world. And that's where I like to see a greater focus.
Okay. Minister Rodríguez López.
I would like to see a world with no visas needed, okay? I think the visa is the problem, because if you have to checking visas and health certificates and so on, you are going to do all airports an horrible place to stay. So without visas, you can go through, and you don't need to have all those, how you say, all those, extra expenses that you have to provide those services.
Right.
So,
Does Costa Rica require visas of most arrivals or some arrivals?
no, we don't require visas to most countries, but to some countries in Central America, just one, and some others in Europe and Africa. But most of the the citizens of the other countries can go to Costa Rica without any requirement.
Okay. Sean?
What I would like to see is more trust between countries to trust each other when it comes to security clearance, when it comes to sharing of security data, especially for large countries. We should be able to come up with a platform where if you are screened in one country and you land in the US or vice versa, why do you have to get screened again?
Yeah.
And that really takes both countries trusting each other in their processes, in their commitment to security, so that we break one of those barriers.
Yeah, I agree. As a frequent transitor, to have to go through that security line again is usually the bottleneck. Frank?
I think we need more common policies among our countries, very similar to what Mr. Rodríguez said, and I think every one of us. You see, we deal in Punta Cana, for example, with the European community, but Canada has other type of regulation. United States have another type of regulation. South America has another type of regulation. So we have really a problem, a huge problem of dealing with so different entities. So I think we have to have more common policies among ourselves. I don't know if we'll be able to achieve a one world passport, but at least we can have common policy among ourselves that will allow things to flow much easier and will allow to increase traffic among countries. Because right now, it's hard to work with so many different policies from so many different countries. And sometimes, even from different airports in the same country. So I think that will be a huge thing. And I think it's one of the easiest one to be able to accomplish.
Thank you. Thank you, panelists, for your insights. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming. And also, all of the sessions, in case there were ones you were having a hard time deciding which to choose, if you want to watch this one again, they're all available video on demand in the apps. And now, their lunch is being served on the terrace. The next general session starts promptly at 2:10. So thank you again, everyone.